Welcome to one more edition of Spotlight, where we discussed the topical issues of international relations. The contemporary debates on India China normalization are often raising questions as to whether this can be described as a reset in bilateral relations, or is the normalization a relatively slower process of thawing between two countries? And a related question as to whether President Trump's tariffs have contributed or triggered that normalization in India China relations. And the reverse argument, therefore, as to whether change of heart in India US relations could mean that the normalization process in India China relations could be pushed into deep freezer or could become even still slower process of normalization. I think the first important point, which is often cited, is to say this current process of normalization in India China relations at least precedes coming of President Trump in his second term in office. This goes back to October last year, when Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President had a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of a BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia. And since then, a whole lot of initiatives have been rolled out as part of normalization process. The fundamental disjunction that one must understand as to how both sides, New Delhi and Beijing, are approaching this process of normalization is that India is looking at it from a very specific border-centric approach. Because India believes that relations cannot be normal as long as borders are not normal, whereas China sees itself as a major global player and takes the argument slightly differently, saying that no single issue in India-China relations should be allowed to hold hostage the entire relationship. And so that disjunction exists, but nevertheless, both sides have started going and doing certain amount of give and take and push the process in terms of several initiatives being put in place, which are one after another gradually their fruition, reaching their natural conclusion. For India, for example, resumption of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and likely resumption of border trade at Lipu Lake, at Shipkila and Nathula on border trade points, and potentially likelihood of revival of exchange of hydrological data of their river waters, which could also be revived. Both sides are proposing to set up a expert group for that purpose as well. And likewise, from the Chinese side, the focus is on India-China being ancient civilization, having a larger regional and global role. So for them, for example, India is willingly agreeing to restart direct flights between several cities on both sides. I remember in 2019, before we went into pandemic, there used to be 536 flights every month between India and China. And Shanghai Delhi was the busiest route at that time, with I think 150,000 passengers crisscrossing every year between these two cities. And then, of course, it's also true that both sides have really relented over a period of time. India has relented on making visas easier, first for the technical staff, now also for the managerial staff of Chinese nationals wanting to come to India. China has likewise agreed to restart the process of exporting some critical sort of materials like rare earth materials or magnets or fertilizers like urea or tunnel boring machines to India, which are critical for India's infrastructure building, for India's production, and for overall development. So both sides are in that sense trying to make sure that they are able to carry forward that relationship. And it is in that context a certain momentum was built when Indian Prime Minister recently visited Tianjin to attend Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit meeting. And the body language of President Putin and President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi again became a subject of discussion. The bonhomie, the camaraderie, the comfort that was reflected was seen as if they are collectively trying to send a message to President Donald Trump. At least the two leaders of Russia and China definitely utilized India's presence in that summit meeting. And we saw President Xi Jinping underlining repeatedly the concerns about the Cold War mindset in United States or the bullying behavior and the use of coercion, underlining how that is destabilizing the world order and how India and China must work together to stabilize the global, sort of governance and overall international relations. Likewise, President Putin, on the last day of his visit to Beijing, gave a half an hour press conference talking about multipolarism as the way, and we should all reject hegemonism, which again was clearly a veiled message to United States, and it started appearing as if India had begun to drift in that triangular relationship with China and Russia. They already have a no limits partnership. And that seemed to be going adrift from India's core principles of strategic autonomy and multi alignment, where India must balance a relationship with engaging uh, as many countries as possible. And that explained also why Indian Prime Minister, before going to Tianjin, had gone to Japan to underline that India still seeks to stay very closely connected with the close allies of United States. And Indian Prime Minister also did not attend the follow-up 80th anniversary celebrations of World War II, where again President Xi Jinping showcased how, despite virtual Western boycott of that event, 26 national leaders still attended that event, and China was able to showcase its modern military power, weapons, and equipment. Now, all this was creating a certain hype where India needed to rectify the strategic autonomy and multi alignment of India's foreign policy. In that context came this sudden off the cuff remark in White House yesterday from President Trump saying that Prime Minister Modi is a great friend of United States, and that there is nothing to worry in bilateral relations. To a question whether the US is still negotiating on trade with India, he said, "I'm negotiating with all the countries." And Indian Prime Minister utilized that opportunity to strike that balance in India's foreign policy, which was appearing to be drifting closer to China, Russia, kind of coming together and putting India in some kind of an anti-Western kind of projection. Because China and Russia often, of course, work together in challenging Western countries on various issues. And Indian Prime Minister immediately has now responded to President Trump's very positive sentiments, saying that India-US relationship is special. And the Indian Prime Minister also underlined how that special relationship is also forward-looking. Now, whether this should mean that in any case, India-China relations are going to be now becoming less important. I personally think that India-China relations stand alone and are autonomous as to how they are moving forward, in what direction they are moving forward. In fact, India again remains very careful in not allowing any third country any role in India's bilateral relations, whether it is with China or with Pakistan. And I think the way the 24th round of special representatives talks that preceded Indian Prime Minister's visit to Tianjin has created a 10-point consensus, is already outlining the second stage of India-China CBMs, which is something that Indian Foreign Minister has been saying for several years now, that the whole set of confidence building measures in terms of various agreements, conventions, and arrangements that were built starting from Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China in 1988, which was largely described as peace and tranquility chapter of India-China relations, because in last 4 decades, both China and India have transformed enormously. Those arrangements were beginning to show a certain fatigue, and we needed to restart a fresh process of building confidence between the two countries to explore opportunities to work together. And that is where I think the 10-point consensus of the special representatives meeting in August underlined several specific areas where they want to, for example, start a expert group on exchange of hydrological data. Or I think the most important to me was a proposal to start an expert group on border demarcation. Border demarcation has not been on the agenda so far, and if they are proposing to start a special expert group on border demarcation, I think that's a very positive sign. And as far as the conversations between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping on the sidelines of SCO summit in Tianjin goes, I think those will be unraveled in coming times gradually. But the fact that they have identified specific areas in the 10-point consensus of special representatives shows that they have some kind of a roadmap map to take that relationship forward. But how that second chapter of building confidence measures between India and China proceeds will showcase as to whether they are going to really build that developmental partnership, and whether this gradual process of thawing can ultimately become a reset in China-India relations, which is very significant because if you look at the world's top four economies, India and China are second and fourth economies in that setting. And therefore, there are going to be increasing expectations of these two Asian giants also beginning to participate and influence in global governance structures and processes. And in that sense, with that inordinate sense of their historic opportunities to uh, guide global governance, perhaps that could gradually nudge them into resolving some of their irritants over a period of time. And there is a clear indication that they both understand this and feel committed to take that process forward. Your feedback is always welcome, and we look forward to continuing these conversations with you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.